I get asked all the time, what are the best watches for people with smaller wrists? So today I want to present 8 amazing options, all under $10,000. So let's get right into it. So guys, as somebody who has a smaller wrist, this is something that I always struggle with, finding a watch that is suitable for my wrist size. I've lost nearly 50 pounds now, and so my wrist has actually shrunk down to 6.1 inches, which makes it really difficult to find a watch that is suitable for my wrist size overall, even though I have a pretty flat wrist. For the most part, the most important dimensions are going to be your lug to lug. However, of course, case diameter is a great indicator as to whether a watch will suit you or not. For somebody my wrist size or a little bit bigger, 6¼ inches or less, for example, I'm going to recommend anywhere from that 36 to 40 millimeter range, again, depending on the lug to lug. The most important being the lug to lug measurement, which is essentially the measurement from the top lug to the bottom lug, and that will really dictate whether or not you can pull that watch off, depending on its size, of course. Now, again, case size is not totally an important indicator. You have some watches, for example, that I love, like an IWC Spitfire, for example, which is 39 millimeters, an amazing, beautiful contemporary field watch from IWC. However, as a result of its long lugs, it actually has a lug to lug of 51 millimeters, making it way too big personally for my wrist. And so again, this is something that is very, very important if you're looking for a watch for a smaller wrist. Starting first with an incredible Longines from the Master Collection, this one featuring a salmon dial that I think is absolutely gorgeous. It comes in at a case size of 38 millimeters, a lug to lug of 44.9, a water resistance of 30 meters, a power reserve of 72 hours, and carries a retail price of $2,500. Now this watch, in my opinion, packs a lot of bargain for the money. If you look at this watch, it looks a lot more expensive than it actually is. At $2,500, I think this is a relative bargain for a contemporary dress watch that definitely looks like it was made in a bygone era. Love the overall look, love the fit and finish. And again, that case size at 38 millimeters is an absolutely perfect decision from Longines. I think they've been killing it with their Master Collection, and it is certainly a great watch for pretty much all wrist sizes. And again, at $2,500, how can you go wrong? Of course, there's a number of other great examples if you're looking at their sports watch collection, like the newer mid-size Legend Divers, for example, in 36 millimeters, which actually wear a lot larger because of those longer lugs. And of course, the Longines Zulo Time, which I believe comes in at around 39 millimeters, but I have a preference towards dress watches, and so my pick from Longines is going to be this specific Master Collection. Now let's move on to a watch from Tudor. Of course, you have a ton of different variations you can get in the Black Bay 58 range, the Black Bay 54 range. My personal favorite is the new release of the Tudor Black Bay 58 GMT. Now, of course, you can get it both on a rubber strap and a metal bracelet. I would tell you probably to get it on a metal bracelet just because the quality and construction of Tudor bracelets are absolutely phenomenal. But it's a watch that comes in at 39 millimeters with a lug to lug of 47.8 millimeters, a water resistance of 100 meters, a power reserve of 65 hours, and the retail price on a strap, or the rubber strap rather, is $45.50, and the retail price on a bracelet is $4,775. In my opinion, that's a relative bargain for a master chronometer certified GMT movement from Tudor on a bracelet that has amazing functionality, and the design is just absolutely flawless. To me, this is a timeless watch that is definitely going to age very gracefully, and that is going to be an amazing part of really any collection, whether you're a seasoned collector with 10 plus watches, or you just have a few, maybe 3 or 4 in your overall collection. I think this is suitable for really all wrist sizes, all collection sizes. And again, it's one of those classics. How can you really go wrong from Tudor? Of course, again, you have all the other Tudor Black Bay 58 variations that you can get. And another one that I think that is a big sleeper is the Tudor Pelagos 39, which seems to be more underappreciated, especially nowadays with the release of the Tudor Black Bay 54, and of course all the incredible variations. But overall, if I had to choose just one, for me, the Tudor Black Bay 58 GMT is the one to get because you get that added functionality for a relative bargain price point, especially at retail. Now, third up is going to be from Omega. Of course, there's a ton of different versions you can get from Omega. There's so many great smaller contemporary wristwatches, but my pick is always going to be generally either either the Globemaster, which I think is a great watch, especially at retail, but I think if you're gonna look for an everyday wristwatch, I think the Aqua Terra is a little bit more suited, and that's the one I would go for, specifically in the 38mm diameter. I think it's an absolutely perfect case size, especially for those with a smaller wrist, and the variety of the overall Aqua Terra leans it to be a lot more versatile, for example, than say the Globemaster, which leans a little bit more dressy, although the specs are very, very good for it. Now, of course, as I mentioned, this is a watch that comes in at 38mm in diameter, a lug-to-lug of 45.1mm, a water resistance of 150 meters, a power reserve of 55 hours, and retails on a strap for $6,000 and a bracelet for $6,300. Again, in my opinion, a relative bargain for a METAS certified movement that's 150 meters water resistant. If you choose to get it on a bracelet, I think this is something that is super sporty yet still very chic, so you can dress it up, dress it down as you please. It's that perfect beach to office wristwatch that I think is perfectly suited really in any collection. Again, like the Tudor Black Bay 58 GMT, I don't think that there is any scenario where it wouldn't fit in a person's collection, whether you're a seasoned collector or only somebody who has a few watches in a relatively small rotation. This fits in well in pretty much any collection. Now, next up is going to be probably the best made watch on this list, in my opinion, certainly for the price point, and that is the Grand Seiko SBGM 221. This is an incredible cream dial Grand Seiko GMT. I mean, how can you go wrong? This is definitely a fan favorite in the watch community, and it's totally understandable why. The fit and finish of this wristwatch is absolutely spectacular. The Grand Seiko SBGM 221 comes in at a case size of 39.5 millimeters, carries a lug-to-lug of 46.9 millimeters, a water resistance of 30 meters, and a power reserve of 72 hours or 3 days, and comes at a retail price, as I mentioned, of $4,900. Again, considering the fit finish of the dial indices movement case, I mean, it's hard to go wrong here. I think, as I mentioned, it is the best finished wristwatch on this entire list, despite there being some much more expensive watches on the list, but I think it's up there and punching way above its weight. And again, that format I think is so timeless and such a great enduring future classic, I think, from Grand Seiko, especially now that it's been in production a pretty long time. You can get these for relative bargains on the secondary market. Next up is going to be a watch from one of my favorite brands, and that is IWC. I'm a huge fan of the Portugieser line, but unfortunately, most Portugiesers just don't tend to fit my wrist all that well because, of course, the larger overall case size. Now, again, that's totally suited for the watch like Panerai, for example, which will be featured on this list very shortly. Unfortunately, these designs are meant to wear a little bit bigger, a little bit oversized, and so I do understand. However, IWC in recent years has been going back in case sizes, specifically in the Portugieser line, which is a welcome addition with the release of the Portugieser Automatic in 40 millimeters. This is a watch that comes in at a case size of 40 millimeters, a lug-to-lug of 48.5 millimeters, a water resistance of 30 meters, a power reserve of 60 hours, and carries a retail price on a strap of $7,100 or a retail price on a bracelet of $8,000. Now, of course, my preference is always going to be to get this on a strap. The Portugieser, I think, just lives at home on a leather bracelet, or even you can get kind of a mesh bracelet for it. There's a ton of different variations you can get, but I think the overall strap option is always the better choice. And of course, in terms of variation, you get a gauntlet of different colors: green, blue, white. I particularly like the white with the blue indices. That's the most appealing and attractive to me. But again, you can really choose the one that suits your personal collection and tastes the best. I love this wristwatch. I think in its case size of 40.5 millimeters lug to lug, it is very well suited for a smaller wrist. It does fit me very, very nicely. It does have that oversized look without being just too big and bulky on the wrist, which is really, really nice. Like, for example, the IWC Portuguese 7-day, which can be very big, especially on a smaller wrist, and the thickness is a little bit harder to wear, especially with kind of a dress cuff, just because it does slide under, but it can be a little bit on the thick side for most people and be a bit uncomfortable in that regard. Now, next up is going to be the Panerai Luminor Quaranta. This was a welcome addition to the overall Luminor range, especially for those with a smaller wrist who still wanted to maintain that kind of macho tool watch look of the Panerai Luminor, but this time in a much more approachable size in 40 millimeters. As I mentioned, this is a 40 millimeter wristwatch with a lug-to-lug of 48 millimeters, a water resistance of 100 meters, a power reserve of 3 days or 72 hours, and a retail price on a strap of $7,800. Again, for those with a smaller wrist, Panerai just wasn't a brand that most, smaller wristed collectors can actually pull off. And so having something in 40 millimeters, both in the Luminor or the Radimir range, whatever you prefer really, I liked the Luminor a little bit more, especially as somebody who's owned both, the Radimir and the Luminor overall. But I think you can't really go wrong with either. These are great contemporary watches from Panerai, and of course they're very, very wearable for those with a smaller wrist at an overall great price point. Now, of course, how could I feature a list under $10,000 and not feature the kings of value, in my opinion, specifically at retail, of course, although their watches are a little bit difficult to get, and that is Rolex. And of course, if I'm going to choose just one Rolex under $10,000, it's got to be the Rolex Explorer 1. And for a smaller wrist, how can I not recommend the 36 millimeter model? This is the reference 124270 that comes in at a case diameter of 36 millimeters with a lug-to-lug of 43, a water resistance of 100 meters, a power reserve of 70 hours, a retail price of $73.50, but it is pretty difficult to get at retail. You're looking at probably about a 6 to 12 month wait overall, and so the aftermarket price or the gray market price is going to be around that $85,000 to $9,000 price range, generally speaking, for a brand new example. And if you're looking at pre-owned, you're going to get something a little bit cheaper than that, maybe around the $8,000 or so price range. Now, of course, how can you go wrong with a perfect three-hand wind and wear Rolex, specifically in the Explorer in 36 millimeters, which I think is true to the original size and the original proportions that this watch was meant to showcase. But overall, how can you go wrong with the 36 millimeter model? For a smaller wrist, I think it's perfectly suited for most people. If I had to choose just one watch on this list, how is it possible to choose something other than a Rolex, considering the build quality, construction, reliability of the movement? But again, given it's something that you can't just readily go in and buy it at retail, for me, the watch that has the most value and is probably the most versatile out of all the watches on this list is actually going to be the Grand Seiko SPGM 221. It packs functionality, it packs complication, it packs amazing finishing, all for a price under $5,000. I think it's a package that's actually impossible to beat. Of course, if we're going to compare it to a Tudor Black Bay 58, which is a little bit more rugged, a lot less versatile, it is more lenient towards a sports watch, although you can kind of wear it dressed up. I think it's also a great option, again, under $5,000. Those are probably my two best picks from the overall list, but I'd love to get your feedback down in the comments below. What do you think are the best watches out there suited for smaller wrists under the $10,000 price point? It's always good to get your feedback overall. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button, subscribe for more videos like this in the future. As always, my name is Marco for Burdeen's Jewelry, and I'll see you guys in the next one.